four-time NBA champion Shaquille O'Neal is one of the most dominant big men in NBA history. But today, we're going to see if Victor Wembanyama can fill his shoes and live up to the hype. And in time, we'll see Wemby pair up with other legendary players as he goes from team to team just as Shaq did. But for now, it all begins with his rookie season as a member of the Orlando Magic, where he would have little to no issue adjusting to the 90s NBA. Because while Shaq was known as a dominant interior scorer with a shaky jumper, to put it nicely, Wemby is the complete opposite, preferring to work from the perimeter instead, eventually stepping into Shaq's shoes nicely, averaging a strong 17 points per game. And when you combine that with his work on the defensive end, it's not surprising that already he's adding to his trophy case just as Shaq did, starting off his NBA career with the Rookie of the Year award. He is off to a very good start in Shaq's shoes. But if you thought Wemby could easily replace an all-time great and immediately take over the league, you're completely mistaken. Because while he'd helped the Magic make it into the playoffs, a feat that not even Shaq could do, he would be welcomed to the postseason by none other than Michael Jordan, who needs no further introduction. Wemby has the potential to become an all-time great and might be the future of the league. But right now as a rookie, he's nowhere close to outdueling Eric Jordan, who would send him home easily with a sweep. That's really not surprising at all. And with MJ going all the way to win the championship and immediately retiring, it's clear that Wemby has a long way to go to catch up to his legacy. But as far as catching up to Shaq goes, he would get one step closer in season number 2. All starting with the fact that he's getting some help with the arrival of Penny Hardaway, an elite rookie point guard with the potential to be an all-time great.
Penny was cold, and that's why I always tell people he was Kobe before Kobe.
Which ultimately means that Wemby has now stepped into the first of 4 iconic duos that Shaq was a part of during his playing career. And while Penny Hardaway's really good, eventually it'll get even better. But while we're on the topic, we have to talk about Wemby himself, as he's averaging 24 points compared to last year's 17, as well as 13 boards per game. And when you combine it with his improving inside game despite his thin frame, what you get is a 60-win season for the Magic, finishing as the 1 seed. And with Michael Jordan retired from basketball during this season, as well as the media hyping up the Magic as the Eastern Conference favorites, the stage is set right now for Wemby to go potentially all the way. So with the basketball world watching, Wemby would not disappoint, defeating the Nets in the first round and the Hawks in the second to make it to his first conference finals. But his run of dominance wouldn't end there, and if anything, it would be ramped up, as he would storm into Charlotte and quickly take a 3-2 lead, now giving him the chance to make history in the following game. He's 1 game away from making the finals, and he's only in his 2nd season. And to keep it short, Wemby would continue to dominate in Game 6, all summed up by 1 final possession, with the Magic up 2 with less than 30 seconds left. Orlando's got to hold on to the lead for 30 more seconds, and they're moving on to the finals. They're about to throw it down into the post. Here we go. Wemby being tested on defense. Alonzo Mourning. Blocked by Wemby. And that last defensive play would be the dagger in the Hornets season and the start of Wemby's first ever appearance in the NBA Finals, coincidentally making it at the exact same time as Shaq did in real life. But just like their play styles, where their stories go from this point onwards are completely different. As while Shaq would eventually lose in the finals, Wemby would continue where he left off in the previous round, holding on to that momentum to take over the finals against the Portland Trail Blazers, taking not 1, not 2, not 3, but the first 4 straight games of the series, securing his first NBA championship with a sweep, a feat that not even Shaq was able to accomplish. And to top it all off, there's still plenty of other Hall of Famers for him to team up with later, especially one in Los Angeles. But while it seems like Wemby's on the come up and that it'll only get easier from here, the 1995 season would throw even more challenges onto the table.
Michael Jordan announced today that he's officially returning to the NBA. Nobody knows his true motivations, but some NBA experts feel it has to do with the newly crowned NBA champion Orlando Magic and their young phenom, Victor Wembanyama.
Which obviously will hurt Wemby's chances to repeat as champion. But on the flip side, it seems like he's not worried at all.
It just felt, it just felt funny how I really don't care.
Which could potentially be a take that ages poorly, since it seems like the Bulls haven't missed a beat since Jordan's return. But for now, let's focus on Wemby's trip in Shaq's shoes, as he's putting up a Shaq-like stat line of 26 points and 14 rebounds, all topped off with the Defensive Player of the Year award, the first of his career. But while the Magic would win 64 games compared to last year's 60, they would actually go down in seeding to the second, with With, you guessed it, Jordan's Bulls at the top of the conference with 66 wins, perfectly setting us up for a matchup between the two in the conference finals. We're gonna see if that championship last year was real or not. And just as a reminder, during Wemby's rookie season, his first playoff appearance ended at the hands of Jordan and the Bulls. But there is a case to be made that the loss he took back then drove him to win the NBA title last year. And for now, that theory would seem to be pretty true, as Wemby would not only match but surpass Jordan's production in the first 4 games, ultimately resulting in the Magic taking a 3-1 lead over the Bulls. But this series is far from over, and there's no way Jordan would just fall flat, as he would take the next 2, bouncing back to force Game 7. But while it may seem like Jordan would have the upper hand based off experience alone, it would be the opposite. Wemby would dominate one last time, eliminating the Bulls to move on to the finals. Wemby has successfully taken down the face of the NBA, and of course, the media is going wild. But the very next day, Jordan would be in the gym, because while he's lost now, it's definitely not the last we'll see from him. In the meantime though, Wemby would make it to the finals where he'd have to take down the Suns, ironically led by Charles Barkley, while Jordan was still in the gym working. And eventually, Wemby would defeat Charles to win his second title and finals MVP in only season 3, while Jordan was getting ready for revenge. Wemby's replacing Shaq's spot in history, but so far it seems like he's on his way to surpassing him. Everything's set up for him to dominate the league for the next 2 decades. But you can be sure that there's someone working out in Chicago with a plan to prevent that all from happening. We'll see how that works out for Wemby as we prepare to enter the 1996 season. But before we do that, it's worth mentioning that he'll be leaving Orlando after this season just as Shaq did, to form possibly the most iconic duo ever out in Los Angeles. With all that being said, Wemby's last season with the team would get off to an uncharacteristically shaky start, actually going down statistically in both points and rebounds, while the man he just eliminated, Michael Jordan, would have his best season yet, leading the Bulls to 73 wins, en route to winning the MVP award. Which obviously should be to the surprise of nobody. It's Michael Jordan. Which would make them the easy favorites over Orlando when the two eventually met up for a rematch in the Eastern Conference Finals, despite Wemby leading the Magic to a win last year. The two have only met up twice so far with a 1-1 record for each, but coincidentally whoever's won has always gone all the way to win the title. But of course, someone has to break the tie here. Wemby's trying to fill into Shaq's shoes and prove that his playstyle is the future, while Jordan is still trying to show the world that he's number 1. The trip to the finals is on the line and both have their own personal stakes. But in the end, it would be Wemby who would fall short to MJ, who's coming back for revenge, destroying the Magic easily with a 4-1 victory. Wemby was able to bring 2 titles to Orlando while Shaq couldn't even get one. But no matter how good he is, he's not good as Jordan just yet. And to top it all off, if Wemby wants to get his revenge, he'll have to do it on a completely different team. Because just as Shaq did, he's heading to sunny Los Angeles for the 1997 season, now donning the purple and gold as a member of the Lakers. And while yes, the fame is nice and there are perks for playing for the most popular sports team ever, the main draw on this team would be a rookie shooting guard by the name of Kobe Bryant, a freak athlete with a legendary work ethic. But while the success that he and Shaq had in real life is well documented, what people don't know is for Kobe's first 2 seasons, he'd have to come off the bench. Which means Wemby would see the same fate as Shaq did in real life. He'd be good for highlight after highlight, but the Lakers as a team would be pretty unspectacular. But the 1998 season would be much more interesting. Unfortunately for him though, the spotlight wouldn't necessarily be on him alone, as this would be Jordan's last run with the Bulls, a team and player who's been the main roadblock in Wemby's journey. But before we see if the two match up one last time, let's check in on Wemby himself, who's now back to dominating, adding a brand new skill to his game with some elite passing, setting up a much improved Kobe nicely, ultimately finishing with averages of 30 points, 11 boards, and 6 assists. And when you combine that with plenty of steals and blocks, in the end what you get is his first MVP award. I would not be surprised if we saw him rattle off 3 or 4 MVPs by the time he's done. And while we're on the topic, Shaq only finished with 1 MVP during his career, meaning that Wemby's got plenty of time to pass him up there in the future. But the main award that we're looking at are the championships, now leading us into the second round of the playoffs where Wemby would have to face the Houston Rockets, who are led by one of Shaq's rivals, Hakeem Olajuwon, a dominant center who defeated Shaq in the finals in real life. Which would ultimately explain a lot. Wemby would take the first 2 games of the series, but Hakeem would take the next 3, pushing Wemby to his limit and the brink of elimination, just for him to strike back to force Game 7. The 2 most iconic centers of the 90s are going at it in a win or go home situation. But if Wemby were to literally continue in Shaq's shoes, he would wind up losing just as Shaq did. But while he's in his shoes, it doesn't mean that he has to meet the same fate. Hakeem is a few years late to meet Wemby, making him a few years older, which would ultimately be all the difference. Wemby would hold on to a late lead in the final minute of Game 7, and after one last exclamation point, Wemby coming off a screen, being guarded by Charles Barkley, the pump fake, driving to the basket, the step back, it's good. He'd have all of the momentum to move on to the finals, where he'd have to play the Bulls one last time. This matchup might even be more important than any other before, as MJ is sitting at 5 championships, which means Wemby has a chance to prevent him from winning number 6 and put him lower on the GOAT conversation than in real life. But with the face of the NBA on the other side, it wouldn't come easily at all, as Jordan would be constantly motivated by Wemby's comments about him earlier.
It just felt funny how I really don't care.
As well as the media crowning him the face of the league too early. So while the Lakers and the Bulls would split the first 2 games of the series, with both MJ and Wemby putting up elite performances, Jordan would take the next 2, now taking a 3-1 lead. To this point in NBA history, no player's ever come back from such a deficit in the finals, but with a player as good as Wemby, and the fact that they have Kobe, who's still not really in his prime but a good player anyway, the Lakers have a fighting chance, all depending on the performance of the league MVP. So with his back against the wall, he would take Game 5 to make it a 3-2 series. And now with a chance to force Game 6 on the road, with his legacy on the line, Wemby would go out and run out of gas.
Chicago Bulls have won their 6th NBA championship.
Wemby had his moments, but Jordan's winning his 6th championship in the end, and if Wemby doesn't one day surpass that number, there's no chance that he could enter the conversation for the greatest player of all time. But before he worries about MJ, he has to worry about Shaq, as the 1999 season would be an opportunity to set the stage for what's to come. As shown before, Shaq has 4 titles in real life, but if we match his years played to Wemby, he has 0 to this point, meaning that Victor is not only ahead of Shaq, but also entering Shaq's championship and prime years. We could be seeing a lot of success from Wemby, all starting with the turn of the century, where Wemby's co-star has officially arrived. As Kobe Bryant has developed into a legit superstar to the tune of 28 points per game. He was slightly underdeveloped in his first few seasons, but those days are over, as both he and Wemby have formed a duo that seemed to be the title favorites. And when you combine it with the absence of Michael Jordan, the two would storm past the Clippers, Timberwolves, and Sonics to make it back to the finals, now meeting the one-man army of Allen Iverson and the Philadelphia 76ers, who wouldn't stand a chance at all. His 6-foot frame wouldn't be able to outplay the craziest combination of size and skill in league history, and when you combine it with the Mamba mentality, the Lakers are easily walking away with the championship, now giving Wemby 3 compared to Shaq's 4. And if it wasn't obvious already, it's about to get scary, man. Wemby and Kobe. But if you thought they would go one and done, you're completely mistaken. As in real life, this would be the start of 3 straight titles for Shaq and Kobe, meaning that the championships could start flooding in for Wemby as we enter the 2011 season. But just as it was when Shaq played, Kobe wouldn't just be satisfied with the title. He wants to be the greatest of all time. And in order to do so, he'll first have to cement himself as the best player on the team. So going into the regular season, we would see a different Kobe. As well as 28 points per game last year was elite, he's now up to 35, on his way to his first MVP award. Without a doubt, the two are already one of the greatest duos ever, but only one can hold the title as the best player on the team. Eventually, we'll find out who it is, but with the two being so good, it's no surprise that we see the Lakers in the finals again, surprisingly going up against New York, unsurprisingly ending with the duo's second straight championship. Wemby has now tied Shaq's career totals in titles in basically half the time, while Kobe's ultimately cementing himself as the face of the team.
And the winner of the Bill Russell NBA Finals MVP is none other than Kobe Bryant.
So of course, coming off 2 straight titles with 2 MVPs on the same team, the Lakers seem to be primed to three-peat. But while there's not really much to complain about, the only thing that really might come up is Wemby being at risk of being overshadowed by another bald shooting guard. But on the other hand, Wemby's a former MVP himself, and now at the age of 29, he's still in his prime, so while a lot of attention has been put on Kobe, don't count him out. He's up to 30 points, 11 boards, and 7 assists, which is ultimately helping him surpass Kobe, bringing him MVP 2 to also surpass Shaq. But their success is, of course, not ending there, because after breezing past the first few playoff rounds, he would help drive the Lakers back to the finals, where they go up against Philly for a second time. And just as it was back then, he would see the Lakers come out on top, successfully completing the three-peat just as it played out in real life, giving Wemby 5 titles to Shaq's 4, with Jordan's 6 on the horizon. He'll not only have a chance to pass him up in the 2003 season, but he'll also have the chance to four-peat. But while Wemby's at the top of the world, he would experience some adversity for the first time in a while. All starting with the fact that he's now in his age 30 season, meaning that he might be on the back end of his prime and that his days as a #1 option might be coming to an end. In addition, he also has a couple other Hall of Famers that he'll share the court with, but that inevitably means that one day he's going to have to part ways with Kobe. But even worse than that, or at least for now, while the West playoffs haven't been notable for a couple years now, Wemby might be going up against his toughest opponent since Jordan in the conference finals, as he's ironically heading to San Antonio to face an iconic big man duo who seem to be well equipped to stop him. David Robinson's really old, but Tim Duncan, he's as good as ever. Probably one of the few people that can actually check Wemby and actually make it hard on him. And that unique situation where they have 2 Hall of Fame 7-footers is the first that Wemby's really had to deal with, as the veteran savvy and strength of David Robinson and the fundamentals of Tim Duncan would shine through. Wemby's avoided this duo for a while now, but it's finally coming back to bite him. While Kobe would have no problems, Wemby would struggle. And while Kobe was putting up 40-point games, Wemby would be the one falling way short. And while Kobe was putting the team on his back, Wemby would be hurting it, as the Spurs would be taking a 3-2 lead in the series, pushing the Lakers to the brink of elimination. Wemby's had no problems with any center to this point, or any big man, except for Tim Duncan. And while ideally for Wemby this would go to Game 7, it would get wrapped up on the road in San Antonio pretty quickly. And this one's over. We're not seeing a four-peat. The Spurs have won. All good things must come to an end, I guess. It's the first time in a while that the Wemby and Kobe duo have fallen short, dating all the way back to when Michael Jordan was still in the league. But even worse than that, it would spell out some serious consequences that go just beyond this finals. With Wemby entering his age 31 season and his contract set to expire, the Lakers GM has made it clear that he's breaking up the team after the following season, which officially means that despite all of their success, it's the last dance for the Wemby and Kobe duo. The two have brought 3 titles to LA just like in real life, and a combined 2 MVPs to the city. But Wemby has a chance to outperform Shaq even more if he can bring a 4th title to LA. But considering his no-show in last year's playoffs, it's far from a guarantee. It goes without saying that the 2004 season will without a doubt be the most important that Wemby will ever play. So for those reasons, we're going to skip past it for now and revisit it at the very end of the video, which means Wemby is now leaving the Lakers and taking his talents to South Beach. To pair up with Dwayne Wade, another star shooting guard who's without a doubt giving Wemby another chance at a championship. But that chance wouldn't be immediate, as D-Wade is only in his 2nd year as a pro. He still has a ton of potential and one day he'll head to the Hall of Fame, but right now he's not ready and Wemby's still leading the team. Unfortunately for him though, he's now on the wrong side of 30 and is no longer averaging 30, as he's now down to 27 points per game, which are elite numbers, but not elite enough for the MVP. We might be at the point where Wemby starts to get phased out on all the MVPs and all that stuff. And as far as the playoffs go, let's just say it didn't go so well. But going into the 06 season, we would start to see the dynamic of the team and Wemby's career change as a whole. Because he's no longer the go-to option like he has been for basically his whole career, with the Heat putting the ball in D-Wade's hands as well. He's not as good as Kobe, but he's without a doubt a great pairing with Wemby, who's still putting up 23 per game. But in comparison, D-Wade would be averaging 30, which would ultimately win him his first MVP. Wemby has been the beneficiary of some really good teammates. But don't forget about the man himself, as he's still very good despite being age 33. And and he would prove to be a great sidekick to Wade, as the two would blast Atlanta and Orlando to make it to the Eastern Conference Finals. But standing in their way would be the Cleveland Cavaliers, led of course by LeBron James, who was really making Wemby seem old. It was over a decade ago when Wemby was in Orlando as a young star, challenging the veteran Michael Jordan. But now the roles have been reversed. Wemby's the vet and LeBron's the young star. But while Jordan's experience back then could be credited as the reason as to why he would outplay Wemby, it would also be reversed, as the youth of LeBron would be too much for Wemby's old legs. He's being sent home as LeBron's moving on. But Wemby's misfortune wouldn't end there. LeBron James is being crowned the future of the league, and the league is now looking for the next Victor Wembanyama. If he doesn't start to win soon, he's getting replaced. But in order to find some team success, Wemby might have to take another step back, as now at the age of 35, he's playing even more of a complementary role to Dwayne Wade, with his scoring going down yet again to just 20 per game. His sacrifice would be totally worth it though, as it's giving even more of a green light to D-Wade, who's carrying the team, winning his second MVP and leading the team to the first seed in the East. For the first time, it really does seem like the Heat are a true contender, and it's just in time as Wemby will be heading to another team next season, so while he's running out of time, he still has a solid shot at a title. All depending on his performance in the NBA Finals, which is the first in Miami Heat franchise history, where they'd have to take down the Rockets, who are led by Tracy McGrady and Yao Ming, one of the few players that can see eye to eye with Wemby. But unfortunately for him, height alone wouldn't be enough to stop the best sidekick in the league. And when you combine it with the performance of a two-time MVP, this one would be over quick.
The Miami Heat, they've done it! They win their first championship in franchise history!
As Wemby and the Heat have bounced back from last year's disappointment to now give Wemby 6 titles, which is 2 more than Shaq and the same as Jordan. It's been a while since he's been able to celebrate, but with the help of D-Wade, he's finally getting it done, which means he's now leaving the Heat for Shaq's next team on a very high note, as he's taking his talents to Phoenix to pair up with former MVP Steve Nash in the Suns. A dominant point guard who controls the game with his passing as opposed to his scoring, which actually helps out Wemby a ton, as he's maintaining his 20 points per game average all the way through his late 30s. On top of that, the Suns seem to be future contenders, as in the postseason, they'd make it all the way to the conference finals against Denver, who are of course led by Carmelo Anthony, but also Allen Iverson, a player who's been defeated by Wemby in the finals multiple times. But this time it seems to be different, as both AI and Carmelo would be able to force this series to Game 7 despite being the massive underdogs. And in that Game 7, which happens to be on Wemby's home court, the back and forth would continue. Both Victor and AI are on the last legs of their prime and are running out of time to add to their trophy cases. So it's no surprise that with the two playing so desperately, we'd see this one go down to the wire. But in the end, it would be the Suns and Wemby in control in the late moments of the game. One more free throw and they're moving on to the finals. 2-point game. If he hits this, they're in good shape. And Denver doesn't have a timeout, so here we go. Allen Iverson with a half-court shot. For a trip to the finals, he almost made it. It wasn't pretty and it almost ended really badly, but at the end of the day, the Suns are moving on to the finals after a hard-fought Game 7. But what you just saw wasn't a story of triumph. It was the last game of Wemby's prime, because a few weeks later, he would fall short to the Boston Celtics in the finals, barely putting up a fight. And his downward spiral wouldn't end there, because now entering the 2009 season, we would see Wemby score a career-low 16.7 points per game. And if somehow you're still not convinced his prime is over, he would be sent home in the playoffs by the Rockets, the same team that he once beat in the finals. What seemed to be a promising tenure in Phoenix has ended as a disaster. So now entering the 2010 season, Wemby would get desperate, heading back east to join the Cleveland Cavaliers to pair up with LeBron James, now being the last player that he's forming a duo with. But duo might be a stretch, as Wemby's scoring is dropping yet again down to 14 per game, which isn't horrible but obviously pales in comparison to LeBron's 30, as he's leading the Cavs to the top of the conference and finishing as the league MVP, which on the bright side for Wemby would be the start of maybe the greatest carry job ever, because the Charlotte Bobcats, the Miami Heat, and the Orlando Magic would be the first 3 victims of LeBron's most dominant season, with the Dallas Mavericks as the 4th. LeBron's bringing a title to Cleveland, but Wemby's got his 7th. And while yes, he basically didn't do anything, a few seasons ago he looked completely finished. So in a way, it's kind of an improvement. And he'll have one last opportunity to change history as we enter the 2011 season, which just so happens to be Shaq's last, meaning that it is also his last. Unfortunately for him though, he's pushing 40 and it's safe to say that at this point he's completely washed up. All he really does now is shoot threes, and if you give it 10 years he'll wind up being a meme. So while the Celtics would head to LA for the finals, Wemby would basically be an afterthought. Of course, he is returning to his old gym and playing against Kobe, but only at around 12 points per game. He's not even close to contributing enough to consider it a duel. So in the end, despite not doing much at all, Wemby would get carried to his 8th title, which obviously isn't that impressive, considering he was just lucky to be there thanks to Shaq. But before we watch him officially retire, we still have one more season to cover, as we're heading all the way back to his prime and the last season that he played with Kobe, because the two can win a title here that actually counts. And just as a reminder, the season prior, the two fell short of a 4-peat at the hands of the San Antonio Spurs. So this season could be used as a form of redemption. And also as a reminder, we're not watching old man Wemby anymore. It's 2004 again, he's dominating, and at this point he was arguably the best player in the league. All starting with 31 points, scoring both inside and out, as well as 14 boards, 7 assists per game, with plenty going to Kobe, and a 72-win season, which can only mean that Wemby is now adding his 3rd MVP to his trophy case, with his 9th NBA championship in his sights. Throughout 2 decades in the league, we've seen Wemby battle it out with Michael Jordan, bring the first ever title to Miami, tag along for titles in both Cleveland and Boston, but with 3 championships, there's no doubt that his career will be defined and most remembered for his time in LA. And now 4 games away from yet another NBA title, there's only one thing left to do. Victor Wembanyama is finishing with 9 total championships, and when you combine it with 3 MVPs, 5 Finals MVPs, plenty of Defensive Player of the Years, and a handful of other awards, it's safe to say that in Shaq's shoes, he's had a GOAT-level career that'll definitely be hard to beat. But there are 2 players that might be able to surpass him, and it just so happens to be 2 of his greatest teammates. If LeBron and Kobe teamed up, could they win more than Wemby's 9 titles? To find out the answer to that question, click the video on the screen.